Now, we're ready for our third speaker of the night. He joined us a bit late. He was coming from work. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Abie Philbin Bowman, and he's going to be talking on the subject of You Can't Spell Comedian Without Media. Give a big round of applause for Abie Philbin Bowman.
Hi, guys. The mic feels slightly redundant, really, to be honest, given the size of the room. Can I just... are there any couples in? Sorry. No. Well, genuinely, though, what percentage of you people who are here are comedians? Just raise your hands or cheer. Okay, so pretty much most of you. And you, with the red T-shirt, you're the only person who didn't put your hand up. What do you do? You're with a... Okay, fantastic. And how many of you are going to Edinburgh, out of interest? 1, 2 people going, 3 people, 3. This is like the count. 3. Okay, fine, cool. I just wanted to know, so I know if I don't want to talk about bullshitty things you're not interested in, that would help. And if what I'm saying isn't interesting, you want to ask something else, just that's fine. Basically, what I want to talk about a bit, because I've been doing comedy for since 2006, about 7 years. Fuck. And a lot of that time, I've also worked in media stuff, magazines, and I currently work on an arts program called Arena on Radio 1, which is where I was this evening. And essentially, I feel like people don't appreciate the value and the power of media. Arena is not an amazingly popular show on the radio. It's at 7 o'clock in the evening, which is not a great time for radio. But in fact, we just did quite badly in the JNLRs. So our figures went down by 6,000. We now get 24,000 people a night listening to us. But that's 24 sold-out Vicar Streets, if you think about it. A night. And it blows my mind when comedians do a radio interview and the host says, so how'd you get into comedy? And they actually answered the question. And they start going, it's like some weird therapy session. They start telling you the story of like, well, I always liked school. And I was always a kind of messer in school. And they actually give a really long, self-indulgent, boring answer. Because if you think about it, if somebody said to you, you get to open for Tommy Tiernan for 24 nights in a row in Vicar Street, you get 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Would you tell them your life story? Or would you be fucking funny? Because that's your job. And if you can be funny in that 3 or 5 or 7 minutes on the radio, loads of that... admittedly, a lot of people are really elderly and never go to comedy and don't give a fuck and are slightly senile. But a certain percentage of them, even if only 1% or 2% go, he's fucking great, I must look out for him. That's a lot of people. And the power of that is huge. And it blows my mind when I realise how many comedians don't appreciate the power that media has to do that kind of thing. I went to Edinburgh in 2006 and I was expecting to lose about $2,000, come home and do a master's. That was the plan. Go to Edinburgh, do the experience, have a laugh, do a show. And to my total shock and amazement, my show sold out and made money. And I attribute this entirely to the fact that I had been working in the media for several years and was a total news junkie. And basically, I know how people in media think, and they think in 15-second sound bites. And they think in terms of, how can I explain this in 2 lines? My philosophy on shows, if you're writing a show, is, first of all, the first thing you have to do is find a joke you can tell 5,000 times without self-harming. Pick a joke, because honestly, if you do a show at Edinburgh, or even if you just tour a show around Ireland, and you have a joke in the title, and you're on the street of wherever flyering for that show, and you're sending out press releases, you are going to tell the premise of that show 5,000 times in total. If you're on the streets chatting to people and getting people to come in, and if you can nail the 40 words in the Edinburgh Fringe brochure, if you can actually be funny in those 40 words, and people reading it go, that's actually... Because if you ever look at the Edinburgh Fringe brochure, and I recommend everyone do it just for the exercise, look at it, go through it, and the number of times you see the words, brilliant, amazing, the new Michael McIntyre, you must see this show! And you read that once, it might sound impressive, but when you read it 50 times, it's meaningless. And when you read it 500 times, it's totally meaningless. And my philosophy in Edinburgh now is like there's 2,600 shows there. I reckon about 1,000 of those are comedy. I reckon about 850 of the comedy shows are white guys in their 20s or 30s with facial hair telling jokes about their life. I include myself in this, and most of the guys on stage, and people, and a lot of you. And okay, some of you might be, white guys with facial hair and vaginas, whatever. But no, I'm being silly. But the point I'm trying to make is it's really fucking hard to stand out. And it blows my mind again how many people have a show title which is a pun based on their name, which you've never heard. What? That doesn't tell you someone's funny. It goes, I am able to sit down with my name and a bunch of faux film titles and find one that sort of vaguely looks like my name and then make it a title. That's shit. It just doesn't work. And when you go to Edinburgh and you read 500 shit puns based on someone's name you haven't heard of, it doesn't inspire you really to go and see that particular show. If you're Tommy Tiernan, you can call your show Bovinity or Cracked or whatever the fuck you want. I mean, I think Dave McSavage, when you were at Edinburgh, called his show "I Need to Make £48,000," and he did fine because he's Dave McSavage. He stands in the street and he does his guitar, and people just gather around. He goes, "I've got a show on here for £5," and they go, "Oh, brilliant!" and they all come in. But if you're not him and you can't do that, don't do that. Tell a really good fucking joke and put it in the title. And when the media comes to you and asks you stuff, be able to tell really short, funny, quirky stories, because that's all they can understand. They have a 15-second soundbite. When BBC News turned up to film about my show, and they only came to it because it had a weird media catchy title. But when they turned up, I remember saying to them, "So do you want 9 seconds or 15? Because I've watched BBC News for fucking years, and they only ever have like 15 seconds of a person talking about the thing they do. So there's no point in me doing 2 minutes of material. It's not going to use it. So get a 15-second joke and lash that in." And I think the key for a media tip is when you're writing press releases is try and write in the style of a fifth-rate journalist, so that a sixth-rate journalist can copy-paste it and claim they wrote it. Because honestly, so many newspapers and websites now are massively understaffed. They don't have the time to research or do anything. I've literally seen press releases I've written with typos reprinted, exactly the same thing with the typo in different newspapers around the country. Being able to spin things is also kind of useful. Like I had this really tiny run-in with this little junior councillor in the DUP who said, "I think this show is offensive and I would encourage people not to go see it." And I managed to turn that into DUP boycotts, and that played very well in the southern media particularly. And I've been going boycott about the DUP for the last 6 years on the strength of that. And it was just one stupid twat who's a councillor, but he's the DUP. He could not see the show. That's the fucking boycott in my book. So being able to be a deeply cynical prick, and also being able to just chop quotes in places is also very helpful. I had one comment that said, "With his stupid orange uniform and crown/hairband of thorns, Abie Bonham has sort of vaguely become the face of this year's Fringe, the Scotsman." And I went, "The face of this year's Fringe, the Scotsman," which again quite helpful. But really, if you're trying to get people in and you're trying to get the media on side, just write to them. Write to them with a funny, quirky story. Don't hire PR people. They're a waste of money. Phone shows like Arena. Just find out who produces it. Write to the producer and go, "Hi, I'm a comedian. I've got this thing. I can be funny for 7 minutes." Listen to the shows. Work out what it is they want. Give them what they want. They're usually run by people a bit like us, to be honest. Geeky, facial-haired people in their 20s to 30s who want to change the world but really just would like to hear the sound of their own voice magnified many times. And if you work on that basis, it's amazing how long we can get away with being a comedian/media thing. So that's more or less what I had to say. I hope it was useful, and if there are any questions, I'm totally cool with that. Thank you.
Abie Philbin Bowman. I'll get a mic over to you, Alison.
Hey, Alison.
Hiya, how are you? I got a question in regards to your gigs.
Yeah.
Because you do a lot of gigs in art centres and stuff like that.
Yes.
And what made you go down that road, and how is the road and all that jazz?
Very, very simple answer is that there wasn't any way I could get enough stage time in clubs. Because Dublin, as you all know, is fucking tiny. There aren't enough clubs. The Comedy Crunch is fabulous, but they've never booked me, so they can't be that good. Well, that's true, but I assume that I'd be so fabulous successful that you'd... Anyway, it's fine. We could. It really does it. It's amazing half of that fails. Anyway, no, look, I'd love to... Anyway, point of story... Give me a gig sometime. No, point of story is, basically, I was getting about 5 minutes every 2-3 months. And I figured if I'm getting 5 minutes every 3 months, that's about 20 minutes a year. And you can't learn anything doing 20 minutes a year. And actually it was Ruben, the mime dude who's on RT2, who said to me, on RT Junior rather, who said to me, just write your own show and do it in a really small place and then sell it out. And then when you sell it out, go, Abie brings his sold out show to no. And... So I did that, and then the other thing, the really big thing, was I went to Edinburgh as a journalist, and I saw about 31 shows in a week. And afterwards, I went to myself, okay, why were most of them half full, ish? Why were the ones that were full? Why were the ones that were amazing? Why were the ones that were shit? And if you think about it and you look at why you picked those 31 shows out of all the things you could have gone to see, you start to realise, okay, time of day is important. Not being on at a super competitive time of day between like 7:30 and 11:30, which is when all the really big names are on. Don't go on then. Pick a central venue, because there's a really central core in Edinburgh, particularly of like Gilded Balloon, Pleasance, Underbelly. That sort of triangle is massive, and there's so much on there that most people just hang around there. If you're miles out, no one's going to bother taking a bus on a risk for a show they haven't seen. And then it was really down to, okay, the title's really fucking important. It's the one thing almost everyone will see. So pick work out a title that's funny, or that at least makes someone go, what the fuck is that? And that they read it and they go, oh, that's that. So the titles that have really worked for me were Jesus, the Guantanamo Years. You go, what the fuck is that? And you read it. It's Jesus Christ comes back to earth but doesn't get through US immigration. He's Middle Eastern, bearded, and wants to be a martyr. That worked well. Eco-friendly jihad. Again, what the fuck is that? Picking two things that don't go together, just shoving them together and explaining why they're together works. Eco-friendly jihad worked. The one that really bombed horribly was a show called Sex, Lies and the KKK, which I think was the strongest of the three shows, but actually had the shittest title by a mile. That year, my ass was handed to me by a group of guys from Trinity who came up with the ingenious title for a show about Barack Obama called Obama Mia. Bastards. But, fair play to them. They got a brilliant title. I think my favourite all-time example of a really good title for Edinburgh is One Man Star Wars. Because you know exactly what you're going to get. And one person in 50 goes, I have to see that show. That's all you need, is one person in 50 going, I have to see that show. And that's kind of a big thing. So yeah, I started doing so literally, I had a bit of success in Edinburgh, and then I went, okay. But I got back and I kind of assumed, I've made it now, I'm a comedian, and I wasn't, of course, and no one wanted to give me gigs, and if anything, they were slightly resentful that I'd done well at Edinburgh. So I had to go off and start phoning art centres. But the really great thing about the current climate is that there's loads of art centres around the country, and loads of theatre companies can't afford to keep going because they've got directors and writers and a cast, and that's way too many people. But we are self-employed mostly, and we write our own stuff and do our own stuff, and it's all very economical. And it's a bit easier to sell comedy than theatre usually. So if you phone art centres, particularly I'd recommend the ones on the M50 belt. Driecht and Civic are both brilliant. The Mill in Dundrum is disappointingly not great, but it has a studio you can try. Pavilion in Dunleary is good, but they've only got one big room. The Mermaid in Bray is good. But basically, you approach them and say, I've got a show, I'd like to put it on. They're generally looking for stuff to fill up their spaces, and you will get a bit of an audience. And if you get a good brochure entry and it's funny and you get some nice reviews and you get some nice kind of coverage and you do a bit of radio and media, you start to pick up momentum. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. I've got to a stage now where I'm realising I have to go off and do more media stuff so that I can do tours with the same kind of shows but with bigger audiences. But sorry, that's a really long answer. That's more or less what happened. Yeah, Ireland mostly. I have done a bit in the UK. I've travelled. I've done some really random exotic things. I went to Pakistan and Sweden and stuff, and the Hollywood Fringe in LA, which is a really strange festival. It's an attempt to bring Edinburgh to LA, but there are no pedestrians in LA. So when you're flyering, your two key demographics are homeless people and crack addicts. Neither of whom are major consumers of my work. So the Hollywood Fringe is a disaster because nobody's going to drive for 45 minutes in traffic to take a risk on a show that they might not have, they're just not going to do that. We're in Edinburgh, it's like down the road, they might walk to it. But the big advantage of, I think it's really good to maybe do one or two exotic things, because if you can say, has played in Pakistan, Sweden, Hollywood, people go, ooh, he must be good. And even when you're there and you're like, he's come all the way from Ireland, they go, he must be good. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. I used to write for a magazine called The Dubliner, and there's this wonderful law where the further I went away from Dublin, the more impressive that name sounded. Everyone here went, that shithole, that crap thing was free with the Herald now. Right, which is, that shit rag. But once I got to Pakistan, The Dubliner, oh, that must be like The New Yorker, but more Joycean. Like, they haven't a fucking clue, so they just assume that it's like this august publication. So it's funny how you can become an exotic person and get away with shit in other places, and not even do that well sometimes, but kind of present it as having done reasonably well, and it does make your biog a bit more interesting. And it's fair. I have had really good experiences in foreign places as well. Pakistan was amazing, actually. Sweden was a bit of a weird fringe, and as was Hollywood. But yeah. So I'd recommend just look around at festivals, write to them. They're always looking for stuff. And my thing as well is use the year, like hibernate in the winter and do all your admin and your writing in the winter, and then tour in the. I tried touring in January, February once. Fucking horrible time of year, as you were saying. I think no one has any money. No one wants to leave the house. Everyone's a bit depressed, and planning and organising in January, February, and then touring in the summer is, I think, a good way to go. And going to festivals where there's lots of stuff on. People go, "Ooh, a festival's on. I should go see something," and then the comedy is actually a much easier, nicer thing to go to than a really depressing play about genocide, usually. And so you end up doing quite well. I find I do quite well at festivals. And also going back to the same festivals, if I do well with a new show and have a new show the next year. There's a few festivals I've gone back to 2 or 3 times, and it's amazing how you do actually build up an audience. And if it's good one year, the word gets out, oh, that was great last year, we should really go see him. Even though I haven't got a pretty big profile, like a certain festival, they go, oh yeah, he's great. And I do actually sell out at a few festivals on that basis, so that's kind of nice.
Big round of applause for Abie, Philbin, Bowman again. Thanks very much, Abie. And our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Chris O'Neill, and he's going to speak on the subject of Why Don't You Come Back? Attracting and Sustaining an Audience for Live Comedy. Big round of applause for Chris O'Neill.
Okay, folks, thanks. Thanks, Aidan, for organising all this. Well done. First of all, there's a lot of people in the room who've forgotten more about running gigs than I have. I've only been running comedy gig in Naas for 2 years. Before that, I toured professional theatre groups to theatres around the country, so I got a bit of experience on that. This is based on my views of an experience of starting and failing to start several clubs, okay? All in suburban areas and all monthly and all paying, okay? So I just don't do free gigs, and that's all there is to it. I found out what I found out by mingling with the audiences at the intervals and at the end, and so I tried to find out how people got there and why they've got there. The answer for me in the venues that I run are Facebook and posters in the venues. That's what works for me. Because they're provincial, national media, you're not going to get in, so that's it. Now, just to say what I'm doing here now is focusing on getting people back rather than getting people in the first instance, although the two aren't mutually exclusive. So the real reason for that is that successful businesses, all enterprises, rely on repeat business. Anybody can get someone in the door once. It's getting them back over and over again over a reasonable period of time that makes it viable. The basic premise is that people go to comedy to enjoy themselves, right? And that means the focus has to be the audience, as was said earlier. If they don't have fun, they won't be back. It's not nuclear physics. And so I've looked at what contributes to enjoyment or misery of being an audience member in a comedy club. There's a short list about enjoyment and a long list about misery, so get used to it. First is poor talent, right? If you have 6 people on, all of whom are crap, nobody's going to enjoy the evening, least of all the comedians, right? So you have to balance tickets. Obviously, you have to somebody has to let people on stage for 2 or 3 or 7 minutes when they're starting out. But you can't put on 12 7-minute open mic people, expect people to pay in and come back. It just won't happen. A bill has to be varied. We're back to the hairy males with 20 to 30 talking about themselves. I personally try to make sure any bill I put together is varied by sex, age, accent, gender, and as many other ways as I can do it. Simply because the first night I ran a gig, I had 4 people on from the north side of Dublin. Very nice guys. Thankfully, one of them was really well educated on the south side and didn't sound like a north sider. But the point is, if all 4 of them had sounded like north siders telling roughly similar jokes, it wouldn't have been as amusing a night, right? So that's the truth of it. An MC, poor MC, right? A lot of MCs think they're supposed to be the most important person in the room, and they're not, as far as I'm concerned anyway. The idea is to get the audience on board, warm them up, tell them how a comedy club works, because a lot of people are there for the first time, and then do the most important thing, get off. Right? It seems to be obvious enough to me. I also, as a matter of personal preference, think picking on the front row in a comedy club is lazy, and it's also picking on your customers, and they won't be back. So I hate it. I have a very few house rules, but one of the house rules, you don't pick on the front row. Now, poor physical environments can be important. It's amazing how many people decide to put on a comedy club in a room that isn't a room, doesn't have lights, and doesn't have a mic. So if you make everything bad, including having rubbish seats and stools for everybody, which is not at my age, I can't sit on a stool for more than 15 minutes without needing to go to a physiotherapist. And there's not a lot of people the same age as me. It's true. Yeah, thank you. All right, and if the other thing that drives me mad is late starting, poor timekeeping, and a rambling show, right? Anybody who've worked with me will have seen that month beforehand you get a running order which is down to the minute, right? I know it's obsessive, but that's the way I run them. And I'm probably at the extreme end of the market, but if someone's supposed to do 7, they're supposed to do 7. They're not supposed to do 12 or 15 or 23 or a year or whatever, right? And the one person I've decided I'll never book again is someone who wouldn't get off when I flashed a red light at them. So that's it. The other things mentioned already, structure a show. You don't start with the weakest and run through to the strongest. There's a rhythm to a show. You hide the weaker bits in the middle if you can, basically. So that's that. Now, there's another thing that strikes me about content at the moment. There are very few comics doing anything about the economic situation. It was mentioned earlier that the economy's in shit. I don't remember the last time I heard a joke about it. Maybe some people actually want to hear somebody making some comment on it. That's just a personal view. Now, the next thing is it's very important to have a clear relationship with the owner and clear expectations. That's for the promoter. Sometimes someone who letting a comedy club in the door expects A, B, and C, and the person running the show doesn't share with them the realities. I don't try and tell the venues where I operate how to sell wine or booze or prepare food, and I don't expect them to tell me how to run the comedy. It's a simple enough arrangement. It's the only way it works. Now, the other bit, the less trivial, the less difficult bit, is that people who go to comedy and enjoy themselves forget they've been there and don't know you're on. This happens for monthly clubs, certainly, right? So you need to systematically capture information. Contact details and emails, textbook. This works for monthly clubs in particular. Weekly you can have a rhythm, but monthly you need to pick up all the information you can. And a pattern is important, like the second Wednesday of the month. This is all obvious stuff, but it's amazing the number of people who don't seem to get the obvious stuff and run the thing on a regular basis. So the other thing that's a very simple, straightforward thing, and I've been at loads of clubs and haven't done it, is tell people when the next gig is on. Just at the end, say, we're back here next Tuesday, or we're back here on Tuesday week. Running a club and promoting things is about a whole series of little things. And if, in particular about the things that annoy people, they won't really know why they didn't enjoy themselves or why they didn't want to go back, but they won't want to go back. Right? And the other thing that I meant to mention is material that's hostile to women is very bad business. And the reason it's very bad business is that, in my experience, almost all the decisions about going to comedy, well, my clubs, are made by women. There may be men there, but the women have decided whether they're going or not. And that is my personal experience. So material that picks on, deprecates, is hostile to women, not a good thing. Bad business, and it's also unpleasant, but just that bad business. I just mentioned one other thing. If you're on Chortle and go in, there are loads and loads of articles about loads and loads of things, including one by Maxine I noticed as I was flying back through. And quite a few of them go through a lot of the stuff that we were talking about here and about why comedy clubs work, what's happening to the audience, etc., etc., etc. They're written by both promoters, comedians, and other people, right? So, sorry if I've been dry, haven't been trying to be funny. I don't really succeed most of the time anyway. So, that's it. That's my tuppence paperwork, folks. Thanks a million.
Chris O'Neill. Now, does anybody have any questions for Chris on any of the points he made? Robbie Bonham, you were just... No, only kidding. Just caught him on the way by there for the benefit of all the listeners. Yeah.
When you're booking acts, have you seen them? And
I usually go to gigs, haunt the back of them and watch, yes. Or if someone approaches me and I haven't seen them, I'll ask one of a number of people who also haunt gigs as to what they think of them, right? And I won't be asking that, oh, they're brilliant. It's just, oh yeah, a few people laughed. It's not, I'm not going to set the bar too high.
If you were aware that there was a material subject, like say rape, in a repertoire of a comedian, would you ask them not to do it, or would you just not ask them to gig?
Wouldn't ask them. I'd tell them.
You tell them not to.
You don't do rape jokes.
Okay.
You don't do racism, and you don't pick on the front row. Simple enough, straight. And if you don't like that, that's fine.
What if there's a whole load of women and blacks in the front row? How? Yeah, exactly. I jest.
To be completely honest, that's the story, and if people don't, it ruins their entire set by the fact they can't tell her a racist, sexist, rape joke.
Do you I don't even need to make. Do you also think it's a good idea to go to another club though and say how bad the club is going, that everybody in the room can hear you?
No.
No, that's just something that I don't agree with. Even if it is going badly, you don't have to call it on how bad it is while you're there.
Sounds like there's a bit of a story to that one. Stick around afterwards when we'll be enacting the original event which led to that comment. No worries. So think of it as a workout as well as a discussion.
You're quite emphatic at the beginning that you wouldn't put on a free gig. So you're.
My reasoning for that actually is not to do with the money. Right? My reason for that is that I think if people haven't paid in, the audience don't buy in.
Oh, no, yeah.
Right. That's my reason. It's not. I think you can put on a gig. Lots of people will do it. If what is it? Pay what you like or something. I think if you say pay what you like, right, that's fine, right. And that's if you want to run that. I think you can do it. Right? I'm not interested. That's all. Especially in a provincial area where it's where you have built up a tradition like Colin has in the Comedy Crunch, where you have a big enough room. But you can't have people just meandering in.
The reason I raise it is more to do with acts. I mean, just in terms of the symposium, there's a lot of clubs in Dublin that say if they don't get good numbers in, so they get 5 people in, you'll find you won't get paid at the end of the night. Or say if a gig gets a lot of people in, you won't get substantially more. It seems it's an unregulated industry, so it's more to everyone there in terms of I think a lot of people have experienced that unfairness. As part of the symposium, do you think there should be a regular rate that should be agreed on, or should? I mean, I know a lot of people don't talk about it, but also there's questions about, would women get paid less than male acts comparatively, things like that. These are questions that don't really get raised too much.
My own view is if you're going anywhere, you should know beforehand what's happening.
Okay.
So if it says you're not getting paid, you're not getting paid. If it says you're getting paid €20, you get paid €20. The nature of a promoter is they lose and they win. Swings and roundabouts. If whatever it says, it says. And if a person doesn't stick to that, well then, that's different. But, it should be clear from the very beginning what the story is.
Okay.
If it's clear from the beginning and everybody knows and it doesn't change, but then that'll be my view on that. As long as it's clear, personally I put everything in an email or a Facebook message to all people who are on a particular night, so everybody sees exactly the same thing. So that's my view.
Yeah. No, I think it's something that there should be kind of more clarity between the different clubs about what they're doing.
If somebody says I don't want to work because you're not paying me, that's fine. Seems reasonable.
Oh no, I just meant in terms
or
of...
Or it costs €20 and someone says, well, I might not be able to pay you.
The comedian shouldn't agree to that.
Well, it's up to the comedian.
I think as well, if that's going to be a general policy, that should be more like things through what Aidan's organised here. People should be more aware that that's a situation that they could be getting into as well, that they could find themselves left out at the end of the evening. So other people don't go into it. Okay. And I just think that's the value of something like this.
Just personally, if I wasn't able to notify a headliner within a reasonable amount of time, I would pay them out of my own pocket, because every business makes a loss the first couple of years. Every restaurant, every bar, whatever. So at the end of the day, if you want to run a comedy club where you'll potentially make a profit, you got to be prepared that some nights you will lose money as well. So I think if you can, I don't think booking a headliner and having them show up on the night and then saying sorry, there's nobody here, you're not getting paid, is good enough. I think that unless you can give them a reasonable amount of time to cancel, because this is their living. This is they could be doing something else. Yeah, so I think that's my opinion anyway. I know, I have lost money on gigs when it first started out, whether it was Big Snow or whatever, but which sucked. But it's part of the risk you're taking in having the business.
Anybody who's ever attempted to put on even a one night of comedy will know what the overheads are involved, how difficult it is for the promoters to sustain a gig over time. I think the promoters get a lot of flack sometimes from people who just basically want to know when they have to rock you in, how much time they want, and then get paid at the end of the night without any other considerations. And that's inevitable if that's the end of the game they're in. But just one comment on some of the stuff that Damon was saying to Chris there as well is, like, that's part of the reason why I brought this together. Is I've been out of stand-up for a couple of years now, and I started around 2004 thereabouts. And one of the reasons why I'm having this is to try and see if it makes sense anymore to do it, or if it does, is there any possibility of doing it in an alternative way? In that I found myself doing a gig recently where I received €20 for a spot that I got €100 for 5 years ago. Now, if that's the case, you might say, well, that's just the way things are, that's grand. But from my point of view, I make my living as an entertainer in various different other ways as well. I don't have a regular income. So that necessarily means that that's a consideration for me. If that's the rate that I can command, then I can't afford to organise a babysitter, transport, all the rest of it. There was a gig recently, I think was on Rent a Comic, where they were looking for people to go to Waterford. I think, again, no mention of pay, but they were looking for a lot of comedians to go to Waterford. I remember, and I don't know, now there's nobody actually here who turned up for a gig. We had to go to Tipperary in around 6 or 7 years ago. It was €100 a head for the 4 acts. And the gig was cancelled. We got €50, and we were kind of disappointed about that. And that was €50 for just showing up in Tipperary, and now you're expected to go to Waterford with no expenses paid and entertain people who may or may not have paid. In fact, the indication was that it would be a full room, but that was nothing to do with whether the acts would be paid or not. That's the sort of thing I won't go for. But maybe a lot of people who've got into comedy more recently have no kind of yardstick to measure that against. So, as Damon said, maybe an opportunity like this for people to share stories about how they've been treated in different venues or whatever. And bearing in mind that most promoters are looking to be as fair as they can and to try and just make a decent fist of it and keep the thing going. Sorry, Mark, you have a question?
On the topic of comedians getting paid and how much they get paid, and you're saying about it being an agreed rate beforehand, I think most people would say that that's fair enough, but just as a promoter, do you think one of the things, I suppose, being the internet, and particularly that Rent-A-Comic thread, where, as Aidan said, you can put up on Rent-A-Comic gig in Waterford, who's available to do it, and there'll rarely be a shortage of offers, and it's usually by, I guess, kind of newer guys who are just happy to do it for the stage time. Do you think the fact that it's so easy to get people who will travel cross-country with no expenses or no pay means that it's then very difficult to progress with the ranks? Because a lot of promoters will think, well, why should I hire? As funny as some headliners might be, a lot of headliners aren't household names, and they won't necessarily draw a crowd as much as 7-year guys. Do you think it makes it very difficult for there to be any kind of ranking system when it's so easy to get people to do it for free?
Yeah, it does, but I would just observe that a number of people have tried to run what I call properly commercial events. Properly commercial events with people that you'd recognise, right? And I'm not going to mention the names of the comedians in question, but they are well-known comedians. They've done TV time, and they didn't draw anyone. So the reason you hire a name is to get a room filled, and these people got 20 or 30 people into a room, and I'm not sure how many would have been there if you'd put 4 people randomly from this room on, right? So the fortunate fact is that there doesn't seem to be, I mean, obviously the Tommy Tiernans and all the big names will fill any room, but there doesn't seem to be a sort of mid-tier between people who are hobbyists, for want of a better term, right, and serious full-time professionals who are essentially based abroad and make all their money abroad. When I say all, I mean, not all, but 85% of their income comes from abroad. Tommy Tiernan sells out Vicar Street for 28 nights. I suspect it's partly sentiment more than he just wants to sell out more nights from Darrow Green and Vicar Street. Or if they just sell out one night in the O2 or 2 nights in the O2. There just isn't anybody, because I've looked around to try and find someone that I could put on a poster that would get 100 people in this to come in and pay them. But the amount of money I pay them, if the person existed, the amount of money I pay them would actually be more than 150% of the room.
Yeah.
You know, you're back to the Edinburgh model of pay to play. I'd be paying to promote.
I suppose I kind of meant a little bit more of, does it make our sort of comedians kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit by accepting to do unpaid gigs where they've had to travel for 3 hours with no expenses?
I certainly think if someone's travelling, somebody should be getting some expenses for petrol at least, you know. I mean, that's the minimum. Can't be expected to pay to travel.
Just one observation here. It's something that strikes me as interesting that a lot of comedians are quite left-wing, and yet we work in a business which essentially is totally unregulated capitalism. It is the same business model as supermodels, soccer players, actors, and drug dealers.
Yeah.
There is no, if you, a very few will make it and will make shitloads of money. You know, Jimmy Carr makes over 30 million a year, right? There is no way that Jimmy Carr is 30 times funnier than Damon. You know, just no way. And yet, I know, because I think you're as good as he is. No, but I mean, like, genuinely, it's one of these high-risk professions where there will be a precious few, like, you know, the Colin Farrells and the Tiger Woods and whoever the fuck, you know, elite people who will make a shed load of money. It's partly luck, and it's partly timing, and it's partly, you know, being in the right place at the right time. And part of the way you get good is you practice and practice and practice and really go for it and try and, you know, and also try and think strategically a bit about it. I mean, I got to a point where I was frustrated. Whenever I get frustrated with clubs not booking me, I think, right, rather than just batter them down, because guys who run clubs regularly get so many emails and messages and Facebook things, I always think to myself, what would make them want to book me? Like, if I was on TV, they'd definitely book me. So maybe I should focus on that bit, and then I'll get into the clubs the other way. So I just think it's worth remembering that I mean, a lot of people who've made it have worked really, really hard and done lots of crap gigs and lots of free gigs. And really, at the end of the day, like, I look around at comedy, and I've been here in it for 7 years, and it's not always the funniest people who make it. Sometimes it's people who just try really hard and work really hard and do a lot of gigs. And I think there's something in that 10,000 hours idea that you just do it and do it and do it until you kind of know how to do it.
On the unregulated capitalism thing, I should say the reason I'm limping across the stage is I pulled a hamstring doing water sports at a stag weekend in Galway. You know, we were beginning to think that maybe being pissed on wouldn't be a bad idea after being dragged through the Atlantic at 60 miles an hour with hamstrings screaming out in pain. But one of the other things we got up to our shame, was we ended up in what was advertised as a casino, but what turned out to be a strip club. And there was a number of comedians along for the ride, because it was Danny Kehoe's stag. We were all sitting talking to ourselves and looking very embarrassed with all the scantily clad ladies walking around. And one of the things we were thinking was, you probably shouldn't engage in this because this is exploitative, and these girls, you know, what we should really do is work out how to get 10 minutes out of it. Travel to Waterford and do it for nothing. Because these girls need their plight highlighted. I think there's an irony there.